I am Vadim Viktorovich Bykov. I am recording this short video message for participation in the competition for the prize of the governor of the Moscow region, and I will briefly tell you what my activities are related to. I live in Kolomna, Moscow region, and I have been studying Russian history here for 30 years, and with regard to this competition, I can say that I have done a very big important job. I can prove legitimately, historically, scientifically about the rights of the people of Rus, and up to the year 860 to the Crimea. It was on this peninsula of Crimea, in the city of Korsun, which belonged to either the Romans or the Khazars, that the Rus people lived in some other possible state at that time. He is so mentioned in the Greek translation of the Bible, but excluded from the Latin translations. There he is translated simply as some princes. Russian texts, but from the scientific research of the Academy of Sciences of the USSR in the article 1969th year about Russian writings, which was written by Ivanov. This is our main historian's verist associated with Russian texts. From this article, which analyzes absolutely all the sources that exist in the world for that 860 year. It is known that Saints Cyril and Methodius were sent by the Pope and brought the relics of Pope Clement from Gazaria, from Korsun. And when they were there in the 860-861st year, they found a literate Rus. And a literate Russian, well, competently, this means at that time a priest, they studied Russian letters, the alphabet, the grammar of this unknown language to them, learned to distinguish between vowels and consonants. This is very important, because most of those languages, such as Arabic, are such a whole myth, the Hebrew language, varieties of Jewish. They did not distinguish between vowels, consonant letters, and were announced only by the 15th century. We, the Rus, the people of Rye, who were mentioned in the Bible, that's what I was talking about, the books of Ezekiel in the Apocalypse, we received the so-called Rus writings, that is, Russer. These are the two terms alternating in the annals, as canonical Semitic writings. That is, Semitically, it means from the Arab Jews, from such a people. And we know that Princess Olga, when she came to Varamia, allegedly was baptized, that she had with her the first priest Gregory Vera Siri. Sirin. This is a very important term, it connects us with these Russian scripts. And thus it turns out that Archbishop Methodius of Rome and his brother Constantine were still alive. Yes, his name was Kirill. They received the alphabet and grammar of Russian, as it is written, letters. And in the year 864, they created, adding 7 Greek letters. That's how else, created what we know as the Church Slavonic language for this Eastern Roman Church. And then, from the year 865, they already began to baptize with this new language and a new scripture, and Cyril and Methodius received a fully prepared text of the Gospel and Psalms here. Interestingly, it means they were, these texts, already with vowel letters and they were rhymed. The fact is that in the tradition of those times, only 2 widely spread koans, that is, folk languages, were known. This is folk Latin, Vulgate, in another way Bulgarian. Here, apparently, they are talking about its varieties. And it was this Bulgarian priest of Sirens and as the first priest that Princess Olga used. She was of the Bulgarian royal family from Tsar Shishman. This is a Hebrew term, by the way, Simeon already translates it into Greek, this is later. Russian Bible manuscripts in the Gospels in Sotery with rhyme in Russian, that is, I now have the ancient tradition of the manuscript of the Russian Holy Scripture in the Gospels in Sotery with a rhyme in Russian. Russian, and thus I have these 4 Gospels with rhyme and the Psalter with rhyme, which were created during the Russian Revolution 100 years ago, about here in Kolomna, and written in perfect Russian. Russian tradition, our Russian word and spirit, it just goes back to the time before the year 860 to the city of Korsun in Gazaria. These Khazars are the ancient Turks who owned that territory, and their lineage goes back to the temple of King Arya Cyrus. And there they were, the immortal Khazars. We learned about them at school that there were 1,000 such immortal Khazars. These are the Kagan, that is, the servants of the ancient temple of these Aryans, the Persians of King Cyrus, here from the territory of our Central Asia, which are now part of the territory of Russia. Then the temple was opened from the 301st to the 307th year in the city of Derbent, and the world's first patriarchal throne in Kora, in Derbent. And there, in this Alania or Albania, or Khazaria, and earlier, as it was called, there were these wonderful texts. They appeared there, and the first Christian church in the world appeared from there. These are little-known events. It is usually said that this is an Armenian church from the 301st year. But the Armenians were part of this process, one of 3. That is, there were these Alans, Albans, Georgians, and Vir. Shako means Jews or Arab, that is, priests. And the Armenians themselves, so-called, they were of the Arkau faith, that is, Arias Kohen. These are the ancient Arias of Kohen, also from the east. They have nothing to do with the Hyksos who lived on the Euphrates, they certainly do not have. Those appeared there later. Here, we are related to the Alans. Alan is translated from the Turkic language, and the Turks are the language of the Torah, that is, the supreme of the Torah. We know that the Vikings believed in Thor. Again, someone took our history away from us, but Thor is the supreme of our faith. And from here we have a psalter ending tr, from here we have a monastery again ending tr. This is all our story, which is not well known to many. And I am only restoring part of our faith, because I am the only one who has the best 4 rhymed Gospels in world history, the canonical translation of the so-called Greek of the early 20th century. And the Psalter is a translation from Hebrew and Greek, also from the beginning of the 20th century, which was then in use in our church. And when the priests were expelled, the Russian Revolution came from this Romanov, German dynasty. That is, the censorship of this ancient Rome collapsed and our new world began to be created, in which we now live. Therefore, it is so difficult for us, and we need to prove our identity here, that we as Rus existed in the Crimea both before the arrival of the Slavs, and before the arrival of Rome, and before the appearance of the Russian language, through which, yes, we again received our current scripture now. Yes, it may not be liked by those who follow the tradition of the Roman Catholic Church, which ended in the 20th century. What we had later in the USSR, we now have in the Russian Federation, but it's part of world culture, and I represent the part that now proves to us our legitimacy of the Rus, the people of Rai in the world, and in the fact that our faith is this of our Israel the Most High. Israel has been erased wide here, but this is a spiritual one, not the one that the Jews in Palestine have there now. No, we are Kagans, we are part of this world. And we received from the Most High the Gospel, the Psalter, and perfect, canonical, with rhyme, with vowels. And only then did Rome get it. And Rome testifies to this in its chronicles. Indeed, the Roman emperor writes that Rome received the alphabet and the scriptures from the Huns. The Armenians received from the Huns. Because Vulgate, folk Latin, this Vulgaris means Bulgarian, it was also in Novgorod the Great. That is, it is known that Gennady of Novgorod used the Vulgate in the 15th century, and in the 15th century the Bulgarian Gospel was used in Kiev. That is, here we are talking about this Bulgarian Russian heresy, as it was called in Rome. Therefore, I am determined that we should reveal our world and our legitimacy more widely. Here I would like to declare through my participation in this competition, which is held by the governor of the Moscow region, because we will not have such an advantage in the greater world history that the spirit and word of Rus will simply reveal, and with the perfect Russian language of Alexander Sergeyevich Pushkin. We are talking about a fairy tale, about a story that is written like Pushkin's fairy tale. That is, it is an easy narrative, perfect, beautiful form, here. And thus, this is my work. I would like to receive support. I would like to hand over this book so that we study it, teach our children, sing, record operas, psalms, gospel, such styles when the gospel is sung in the opera. Now we have such an opportunity. Russian audiobooks we could record, because reading such a beautiful perfect text, telling about the phenomenon of the Word and Spirit in Russian language in Russian history is something incredibly unprecedented. Yes, this will certainly cause some doubts among critics, because people want to live in the old, comfortable, traditional, familiar way, as it was in Rome before the Romanovs, then the Romanovs themselves, then the veneration of these Romanovs, as something else. But this is the material world. And I'm talking about the Word and the Spirit that we have now. Therefore, in order to prove our legitimacy in Crimea and in our land of Rus, we must show these monuments. And it is obvious that no nation in the world has such perfect texts as ours, which I have, about which I speak the four Gospels and the Psalter of many prayers in a beautiful, complex, imaginative, beautiful language. Other nations did not receive such a spirit because they did not stand at the beginning of this story. That is, they did not create the Bible. It appeared after. Here, the later the book is created, the less it transfers from the original source. Russian Revolution is now a miracle, a phenomenon of the Word and Spirit, so simply that we had a Russian man in Kolomna, who 100 years ago, having lost all this Roman ancient Romanov heritage of centuries of monarchical civilization, yes, that is, and such a Church Roman, very definite Western, we now, it turns out, have our own. That is, the Spirit has returned to us. And the Almighty has given us the opportunity to breathe, to speak our word, as I am saying now, I am transmitting the Spirit and the Word to you. And if you want to learn more, you'll just find these manuscripts, read them, and get this Word and Spirit further. This is the main beginning of our law, which shows where our legitimate land is. Russian language and the Russian land come out from here. Russian is the language of the former USSR. And all the peoples of the former USSR still speak Russian and scold us, Russians, with our own Russian language, because they have lost the spirit and words, and we have not. See, I testify, that is, we have something that is more perfect than all of them. That is, they can study our culture, use it in the development of their culture, but we will stand at the beginning. Thank you very much for your attention.